everybody, it's Romania Black, and if you can believe it, we are on season 2, episode 4 of Mob Psycho. Oh my gosh. I'm trying to savor this show because after the first season was over, I was like, oh my god, seasons 2 and 3 are gonna fly. They're gonna go by really quickly, and we're already, after this episode, a third of the way done with season 2. I can't believe it. Episodes 1 through 3 have gone by so quickly. And so I'm trying to savor it, but at the same time, I want to binge it. And so it's like, it's this fine line of, do I binge it? Do I watch it? Did I go slow? What do I do? Do I watch like a chunk and then wait? Like, it's just, but I've loved this season so far. It starts out very differently than season 1, I feel. I feel like season 1 is throwing you into the characters, throwing into you who is what, the kind of the realm of the psychics. And this season has so far been much more like low-key and subdued, but it feels like a bubbling under the surface. It feels like a calm before the storm, you know? We've seen how crazy season 1 can get, and I feel like it's just a calm before the storm. And so I'm trying to stay ahead of spoilers, but I'm also trying to be wary and enjoy the season and savor it for what it is. So it's a very delicate balance, right? But I've really enjoyed the season. I don't have any comments necessarily to talk about this week. I've been reading everybody's comments. They've all been really great. And I have to thank you all. Thank you, because you all have done a very good job of not spoiling me and being very kind and patient with me as I truck through this season, and not, even in the Discord and stuff, everybody's been super kind, not spoilery. I can't thank you enough, because it's made me go into these episodes and been like, oh my gosh, and just kind of like explode with euphoria from them. But before we dive into this episode, we have to do the Reigen Thirst update. It's necessary week per week. I do have a non-Reigen thing to show up to you guys that was in the Discord this last week, and that's this beautiful fan art of Ritsu and Sho with their little yukatas on, eating their little food and everything, looking super cute. Why do I ship Ritsu and Sho when we've seen them barely together? Because Sho clearly has an interest in Ritsu, and so that was enough. Crack ship acquired, and maybe it'll turn into something more than that. We'll see, right? We shall see. But that's the only non-Reigen piece of fan art I want to show you all. The rest of this week is all Reigen, which I've been really happy that these last 3 episodes have been Reigen focused. It's been Reigen and Mob. I feel like after season 1, having so much of Mob with Teru and Ritsu, even though I miss Teru and Ritsu, we didn't get a lot of Reigen in season 1. And now we see a lot of Reigen, and we're getting more about his relationship with Mob, Reigen's complicated role as a mentor, but also a con man, how Mob filters into that, factors into it. And so, yeah, it's been very interesting. But I do have a few other things. One is this one that was on Tumblr that was shared in the Discord. And it's you know, we have Reigen's techniques that he uses. It's this one that says, see, I was actually using the most advanced technique there is, called lying. And I was like, just as his super serious face, it's great. There's also this one, I laughed really hard at this, where it was like, you know, you have on Twitter where you reblogs, you retweet something for one answer and you like it for another. This one was like, destroy him with a hydraulic press. And it was like, heart one and retweet one. I was like, I just love that it's a hydraulic press. Someone didn't want to take the time to destroy him, so they were going to have something automatic like a hydraulic press do it. That's really funny to me. I was like, ha, great. But then, you know, that Reigen in that image is pretty nice, but I was like questioning some things when this tweet from Curie was shared of Reigen at age 40. I'm like, if any guy looks like that at age 40, sign me up. Because I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm not usually somebody that likes facial hair on guys. Usually I'm like, facial hair, ugh. But he's doing it. He's making it work. Reigen with like the hair and the facial hair looking kind of like him and Nanami Kento would fit together pretty nicely. They'd work on the same precinct. Yeah, he looks like a cop. He looks like a detective. Not a cop, but a detective on a precinct. And I'm like, I could see it. I realized I put in the Discord that I'm a sucker for 2 types. I'm a sucker for physically a blonde with blue eyes and a suit. Physically, I'm like, check. And then I realized archetype-wise, I'm a sucker for a detective. So that version of Reigen is doing it. So I'm like, that was amazing. And I like Mob, like college-age Mob in the background, like, oh, hey, Reigen. It's like, it's great. And then finally, who knows what's happening with Twitter? Who knows? I put things on Twitter and I like schedule tweets where it's like thumbnails and stuff like to talk about the episodes that are coming out. But I'm honestly not on Twitter a lot. I get on Twitter often, but I don't scroll. I just kind of like check some things out for a hot second and get off. So there's all the debunking with Elon Musk and Twitter and everything. It's crazy right now, but I absolutely loved the idea that there was all these trending things on Twitter in this image. It's like RIP Twitter, so is Twitter, wait is Twitter, Twitter down, Reigen. I love that, like, Reigen always has to be at the scene of the crime. I'm like, oh my god, yes. Reigen just popping up for no reason, which I'm assuming has to do with season 3. I'm assuming it has something to do with season 3, but we're not there yet, right? But I was just like, yeah, okay. Cool. But yeah, that's the thirst update for Reigen. Oh my god, y'all. So last episode, Mob had a bit of an existential crisis where he realized that he is in fact OP. He could in fact hurt people, and if he ever got to the point where he would try to like hurt humanity, who would stop him? And I'm like, well, those are questions to ask. You don't like where this is going, but we'll see. I was like, But yeah, it's one of those things where you just don't know, because Mob, this series it's so wholesome and it has such really powerful messages, but then this show is not afraid to get dark and crazy. And so I'm like, you kind of worry. You're like, I think everything's going to be okay. I think, but you just don't know for sure, right? So, and last episode, Reigen luckily has realized that Mob's thinking about things like this. And Reigen's like, okay, I need to keep my eyes on Mob. Watch out for this kid. Some bad things could be going down. I need to be his mentor. And it's like, okay. So there's that. But yeah. I'm really excited, y'all, to see what's going to happen. But I'm also pretty scared because we're a third of the way into the series and things have been going, it's been like a little chugging along real nicely. And now I'm like, okay, when's the shoe going to drop? And we'll see if it's this episode or not. So we're going to start Mob Psycho Season 2, Episode 4. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Wow, so this episode, oh my god, I think my jaw was on the floor for like a good solid third of it because I was like, what are we doing? This got dark and it got crazy real quick. And I was like, oh, it's kind of funny. I talked about how this season was very different than season 1. And it kind of is, right? It kind of is from the start. But there is a similarity with this episode in season 1. We have at the start of season 1 where we get introduced to Mob, to Reigen, we get to find out what the psychics are, and we slowly kind of get introduced to like other elements like Teru and Ritsu. We don't necessarily have that at this point, but this episode is very, very similar to episode 3 of season 1, where in that episode we met Dimple-sama in the cult, and then Mob kind of saved everybody here. And in this case, we have Reigen and Mob together, kind of like in another situation where it seems almost like a cult setting where everybody's all gathered together. But no, instead of it all being like the masses gathered together with Dimple trying to manipulate them, it's all these psychics gathered together. And this guy, KJ, is trying to like kill them all. So, holy cow. But yeah, things got dark real quick. And a two-parter. To give you guys some context, I am going on vacation tomorrow, and I'm going to be gone for half a week. And I'm not going to be able to watch the next part of this until probably you all do next week. So I'm like, I was like, dang it, no! How dare they? How dare they, right? Oh my god. So yeah, that's where we are. That's what we are. But I wanted to go through this episode and just kind of like go through, like, I don't know what exactly I'm going to write on my board, Coon. Probably stuff about the themes and everything happening in this episode. But holy shit, what an episode. Like, just lots of things going on. Mainly, this will probably be about the final conversation between Mob and the evil spirit, right? Who is a human? Who is a human? We need to talk about that. So the idea that these evil spirits, I'm just going to write it kind of up here in the corner here. The idea that the evil spirits in this series originally can start out, they were human. They were human, but they died with vengeful souls of hatred or sorrow. an unfinished business, right? Unfinished business. Because the family that we saw back in the last episode, they didn't necessarily die with hatred or like vengeance, but they were sad. Like they didn't maybe, what we don't know about the last episode is, did maybe they die without being able to connect with one another? Maybe they lamented the fact that they couldn't be a family together as often as they needed to, and so they stayed back as ghosts to be that family. Because the one ghost, the dad said, well, once we've satisfied this need and fulfilled it, we will move on to the next life. So with them, it could be the idea that they weren't able to become a family, so as ghosts, they were all going to become a family together, and then once that was fulfilled, they'll move on. It seems like our vengeful spirit in this episode has this vengeance against psychics and wants to fulfill that, right, and get revenge on them. So that leaves the question of what Dimple Sama exactly wants, and maybe we'll find that out as we go. But yeah, so we cut back to the past. I'm glad we get some explanation with this, because I was like, what are we doing with Dimple Sama in this? And the answer is, we're doing like a flashback, and they say, what do we do with them, Dimple-san? And he's like, it's probably just another fake. So we cut back to Dimple Sama, and I guess some followers or with someone else. That is curious. I have a question about Dimple Sama. And so I'm going to put Dimple up here. The idea, and I'm glad I chose green because that fits. But the idea of who Dimple has worked with. We don't know who Dimple's work. He's working with somebody in that episode at the very beginning, but he doesn't say in the flashback who he was working with. So that's curious. I feel like that's something maybe we'll find out later. He's like, get him to scram. Or maybe it was just his followers. Maybe it was just as simple as it was his followers, and then they couldn't get the psychic to scram. Instead, he ended up like chasing them all away. He's the real deal. And Dimple, I love the idea of the fracturing of everything around Dimple Sama. That's wonderful. I love that. And then what a way to like just disorient you right from the start. Like it's so disorienting from the get-go, and you're like, what do we do with this? And then the episode, Inside Evil Spirit. Yeah, I go figure, right? We were about to start this episode. I'm like, I guess things might kick off in this episode. And it does, like 1,000-fold. Oh my God. So yeah. So anyway, we cut to the idea that the job we get is huge. Now, I like this juxtaposition, right? I like this instant juxtaposition where we have Reigen being like, hey, we got a good deal. We got a client that's rich calling us to go work for him. And I like that you kind of see Reigen's motivation and his desperation in this moment, because he has the cup of curry, like the cup of curry at his side that's symbolizing like, we don't got a lot of money right now. Things are tight. We're eating ramen out of a microwavable container. Might need a good job to kind of see us through, right? He's like, I don't know the details, but the client is famously wealthy. We're talking super rich. I like, Reigen's like, yes, he'll even pay for our taxi. And Mom's like, and yet we're taking the train. So I like that. I want to bring Reigen up here. Reigen gets to be in pink because baby girl. But yeah, I do like this about Reigen, that he doesn't take advantage of the offer. Because yeah, he said he'd even offer to pay our taxi, and Mob's like, but we still took the train. And I took that to mean that Reigen was like, he didn't want to owe the guy any favors. He was like, oh no, we got this, don't worry. So that when they get the money, it's not like he's not going to deduct anything. You can look at it one of two ways. You can either look at it the businessman con man approach, where he didn't want to take the offer up on the taxi because he doesn't want to like owe the guy anything and be like, oh no, we drove ourselves, and the guy will like give him the full reward instead of deducting something for the taxi. You could look at it that way, or you could look at it where Reigen is being actually kind and saying, oh, we're not going to take advantage of this guy. He's already paying us for the job. Let's not take advantage of him paying for our taxi as well. So you can either look at it the con man angle or Reigen being actually nice. And it could be both. Could be both between them, right? But him and Mob taking the train there, and then them getting, so this rich person's the president of a company. And he says he is. And I like that Reigen, like the animation, his suit's a little disheveled with Reigen. And Reigen's like, oh, I really like the voice acting of Reigen where he's like, oh. Like, I want to get a shot of that picture of him gawking at the mansion, right? Where he's like, what a nice place. Because from what we know of Reigen, he just lives in like a little studio apartment. But he's like, oh, and it is a very nice, how can one person own a house like this? I said YMCA in the reaction, but it kind of looked like the Village People, like the 70s band Village People. I've noticed that one in their character designs and the way that they draw some of those landscapes and outfits and designs, it seems very like 60s and 70s inspired. I don't know how old one is as a mangaka, but they seem like they're inspired by a lot of 60s and 70s clothing and patterns and colors and shapes. So that's really curious. But yeah, we've got all these crazy psychics here, right, that have all been gathered. There's like one that looks like a basketball player. There's the guy with the ladle, somebody in like just like a bib with crazy eyebrows. And Reigen's like, wow, they're all from the same field. And I like that you look over there. It looks like one of them kind of has like Saitama's face on there from One Punch Man, which is kind of fun. And he's like, oh, hey, you two. And it's Banshomaru. So Banshomaru's here. Nice. He's like, what the heck are you doing here? And he's like, right back at you. And then, like, we see Jodo-sama, who the Rising Sun Spiritual Union president is. So we have members of we have the Rising Sun Spiritual Union. What a sham. I love it. We have like all the members in the suits and everything, and there's the one guy with the green tie that's like discount Reigen in the background there. He's like, he helped me with getting rid of an evil spirit once. He's a freelance psychic. And the look that Jodo gives him, he's like, so this is the man that's non-union. It's like, oh my God. I feel like Reigen's kind of like Job off of Arrested Development. The one that got rid of the dragger. And Reigen's like, I like that Reigen's like, do I take credit for getting rid of the dragger when it was really Mob that did it? He's like, do I take credit for it? And he goes, pleased to meet you. Like, he doesn't accept credit, but he doesn't deny it either. He just, like, flows with it. He's like, it's fine. And he's like, so that's Jodo. And they're like, avoid eye contact. What a creepy geezer. And then we see Matsuo from Claw. Oh, my God. He's like, it's them. And it says, former upper echelon member of the Claw's 7th Division, Matsuo. And it says, having a rough time trying to get into the psychic biz. I'm just like, Matsuo, he's here too. I really thought going into this episode, once we saw Matsuo, I really thought this episode was going to be about him. I thought he was going to be the focus of it. But no, he's like skirking off in the shadows like, I don't want any part of these guys. Like, Matsuo being there is kind of insane. I love the way he's drawn too. He looks absolutely terrifying. He's like, I'm running a legit business now. Oh, he's like, so Matsuo, he's trying to be a real psychic. Aw. I honestly thought Matsuo would have a bigger part in all of this in this episode, only because we've seen him like collect the spirits and have like the dolls and things like that and the items to represent them. I really thought that would have something to do with like the teddy bears and things like that the girl had, and maybe Matsuo will have a bigger role in the next episode, maybe. I don't know, but I really thought he would. I was expecting him to play a big part in this, and he kind of doesn't. So then we have, like, the girl. And like, has he locked her up, the daughter? And then Reigen says she's the same age as Mob. So Reigen's like, okay, there's this kid that's Mob's age, like, there. And they all question it, but the girl is seemingly possessed. And Reigen's like, well, what do you think? And Mob's like, I don't really sense anything right now. And he's like, it's probably a mental disorder stemming from adolescence. So Reigen, King of Kings, is trying to offer a rational explanation. He is trying to give a real life explanation, being like, okay, what is this business? Like, there has to be something to it, right? And I'm going to put Mob over here next to Reigen. We're going to put Mob over there. So yeah, Reigen's trying to find out like a reasonable, like, okay, what could be wrong with this girl? Surely it's not anything like weird or supernatural, right? And then I like these, like, I sent a faint, sinister presence. And there's Dimple extremely nearby. And it's Dimple, the sinister presence. Of course it is. And Dimple's like, and so this guy's like, no price is too high. And I love that Reigen's like, his like ears twitch. He's like, no price is too high. He's like, all right, let's go. Let's do this. And so they all decide The thing of it is they're about to start like a mob. They're like, well, why do you get to decide who gets to go first? What's the deal with you? And these people all looking ridiculous. And the guy's like, now wait a minute. How about we do rock, paper, scissors? And they're like, oh, rock, paper, scissors? Oh my God. I freaking love it. We're like, I guess that's fair. What I love about this series is that as freaking dark as it is, and that a man gets murdered and impaled in this episode, and a teenage boy goes like invades the body of another spirit, and like all this crazy dark heavy thematic stuff is happening, but somehow one in the midst of all of that is able to go, we're going to have these psychics agree on who's going to help the girl first by a game of rock, paper, scissors. And they're going to treat it dead serious. It's absolutely amazing. And they're like, sure. And then Reigen's like, all right, well, I'm going to throw paper. Like Reigen just using his reverse psychology to get them to think he's going to do one thing. And he's like, And then I love that Shin-kun's like, that's just how he is. Leave him alone. And I love that Matsuo's like, is he gonna throw paper or scissors? One's humor in this is absolutely hysterical. And so then they're like, first comes rock, paper, and then Reigen emerged victorious. I'm like, I honestly can't. I love Mom's just standing beside him, and it all looks like a painting. Reigen, of all the 69 psychics there, and he's like, oh, what does he say? I never lose to anyone in rock, paper, scissors. Why did the animators make him look so beautiful? And it says, psychological warfare, line of sight, scan their arms, observation, etc. Their hand angles. Reigen is a master observer. And the rock, paper, scissors king. But he's a con man. He knows sleight of hand. He understands, like, he can use psychology on people, and he also understands how their movements affect their actions. So Reigen is smarter than he looks, right? And he knows how to use his talents, right? He's like, scan, view, etc. Oh my God. I love he's just like, well, see ya, losers. And I love that Shimura's, that she's like, I wish I should have said I never knew him. It's so good. But anyway, I like Reigen. He basically goes in there and questions the spirit. I feel like the scene where he's on the bed with her talking is something straight out of it seems like something straight out of The Exorcist, right? Where he's on the bed like the priest talking to the girl. He's like, I'm going to just question like I always do. And then the spirit, he's like, do you know why you're locked up? And I love that all he does is question. He questions very simply, and the spirit says things like, oh, well, my dad beat me and he's done all these things, and the dad's like, it's not as bad as it sounds, and everybody's starting to turn on him. But then Reigen comes out, and Reigen's like, okay, and uses 2 + 2 to put together, and he's like, okay. He's like, I'll go ask your dad. And I love that Reigen says, this isn't open and shut. The one Jodo says that she's perfectly normal, and that it's all just a setup, right? And Reigen's like, nah, this is a lot more sinister than that. She's definitely possessed. And the dad's like, that can't be true. And so then this next guy goes in, and he ends up just getting the place blown up. And they're like, are you sure you're not the problem? And so it's crazy that we see the dad looking at all of them, and he sees the bears, right? And it's like his vision turns them all into looking like bears. And for a second, I thought maybe that was the spirit's power, like the spirit had possessed him too, and was making him see everyone as bears as well. I don't know. It seems like he sees them all turning against him. It's really, the visuals in this episode are absolutely insane. And that's when Reigen speaks up. He's like, is that really how you guys talk to a client? So I love that Reigen comes in and is like, he has to be the professional businessman, right? He's like, you guys, seriously? Do I have to be the adult of all adults here? Is that just how this has to go down? He's like, that's a nasty one. There's definitely something wrong there. And yeah, the moment the child looks over to him, I was like, oh my God, no! It doesn't feel like I was talking to a child. And then the dad's like, do you believe me? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, you just want the reward money for yourself. And he's like, no, something's up. He's like, anyone who actually fell for what she said should leave now. She's going to make a fool of you. The way she talked was too inconsistent. She switched from Papa to Dad. And I never introduced myself, but she knew I was a psychic. She can see through the glass. And Mom's just like, Sensei, like, you've got it all figured out. And, like, the cinematic quality of this episode was incredible, because the moment where he's talking to all of them and the lighting and the shadows and the glass bursts through and, like, cuts Reigen's face and everything. But yeah, Reigen figures it out. He figures out the deal with the girl. So he solves the case somewhat. And that's when the spirit strikes, right? She heard the conversation. Oh my God. And Reigen being like, oh my God, and getting like cut with the glass. Oh. And getting knocked out, and everybody's like, I love just the cinema quality of it. And yeah, just the animation. I'm like, Bones went crazy with this episode. And y'all have said that Bones loves this series and dedicates so much time and effort into it. And you can tell it looks beautiful. And the animation's incredible. But he's like, there's no point in continuing this charade. Try to force me out of this girl. And Dimple's like, oh shit, it's them. And just like the crazy thing where it's just, it becomes a comic book, and it's like the one girl's like possessing all the psychics and making them do things. Like, it's insane. Like, what is this? It gets so abstract. It's weird. And Reigen's like, okay, your turn might be coming up soon, Mob. He was the winner, and Mob was 49 out of 68. Mob was right smack dab in the middle. Of course he was. Right? Oh my God. He's like, you're making it sound like it's a workout. And Dimple's like, this is not good. And he's like, what's wrong, Dimple? You're shaking like crazy. Are you a chihuahua? He's like, there's still time to drop this job. He's like, I'm sure you've at least heard the name for Mogami Keiji. Mogami Keiji. So Mogami is the vengeful spirit. So we need to write down what we know about Mogami Keiji, right? So Dimple's like, surely you've heard that name before. And Mob's like, no, because he's like a kid, doesn't know any different. And he's like, he's one of the people I referenced when I first started. So Reigen has referenced him. Referenced by Reigen. Now, we know Reigen's like in his 30s, so it's not been that long ago that he referenced him. But Dimple's like, yeah, he's been dead for ages, though. He's like, we're talking about 40 years ago. Okay. And so they give the backstory that he's like, he was known as a good psychic who used seances and channeling to save people. So basically, 40 years ago, he was doing seances to save people. Okay, using his psychic powers to help others, right? Which Mob has kind of had a dilemma with, of what to do with those powers. And saying, and the media loved him. And that kind of goes back to the idea of the media. The media loved him. Which kind of connects in a way, and I realize that marker is absolutely awful, but it kind of connects, we'll bring this up here to Mob. The idea that Mob has been faced with this dilemma of using his powers. And does he use his powers to save others? Does he talk about his powers with others, right? Because Misato is trying to get him like come out and become like the leader of a cult, basically. And then it's like, does Mob use his powers? Does he talk about him? What do we do with that? And it seems like Kagami is kind of a thing with that. What the master was seeing was the entertainer. And then one day he vanished from the public eye. He had another side to him. He was an assassin who used his powers to kill. So, Mogami not only was saving people, and it was a front. It was all front that he was an assassin and used his powers to kill. So, it almost seems like Mogami is one side of the dilemma that Mob has been facing, is that Mob has been like trying not to use his powers at all, because then because Mob has come to realize that he has a choice, right? And Mob's like, if I keep using my powers, I'm eventually going to have to decide whether I'm going to use my powers to help people or use them to hurt people. And it's not that he has to choose one or the other, but it's the fact that he will have to make a choice over and over again. The more he uses his powers, the more he's going to be faced with that choice. Do I use it to save someone at the risk of hurting others? And it seems like Megami, he went all in on not only all in saving people, but all in on killing them too. So he's kind of the opposite of Mob. He uses powers like to the full extent, whereas Mob wants to not use them at all. And so we get this, like, we see the government photo, we see the cash there, and he's like, he was desperate for money, and his mother was gravely ill. And the treatment and equipment she needed costs a lot of money. And so we see like this like dilapidated home, and it's like disgusting. There's flies everywhere. It's gross. It's like, what do we do? But yeah, it's just all over the place. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Being it the living or the dead, seeing their final moments had become routine for him. So that's the idea that Mob's been faced with. This challenge that Megami saw the last moments of the living and dead, and it corrupted his heart. And that's the thing about it, is that so far Mob has been seeing the last moments of evil spirits, right? And I think Mob's been able to tolerate it and work with it because he knows that he's exorcising them. They're moving on to the next life. But they were already dead. So Mob's been able to deal with that. But Mob has had that kind of corruption kind of built in him over time. And Megami, it's just been like to the extreme. And I love that visual of him standing on his heart as he slowly becomes black with like decay. It's like, and he kind of becomes, it broke him. And he becomes like the 1,000%, right? It just ended up breaking him. He saw too much death, and it broke his entire spirit. And that's around the time that he showed up to exorcise me. Yep. And so we go back to the beginning where his followers were taken out. And I love that Dimple in his flashback shows himself like in full Hulk mode, where he's like super powerful, like super buff. He's like in the full Hulk mode. I love that that's how Dimple portrays himself. It's great. But he just instantly, like, he does basically what Mob did to him back in season 1. Like his powers are not too insimilar. But here's the thing. He's like, before Dimple gives up, he like starts to soak up. He's like, you have the wrong idea. He's like, I've come to absorb you. And he's like, absorb me? And he's like, yeah, he's human, but he's absorbing spiritual molecules. So we come to this idea that humans can absorb spirits. So psychics, this idea of psychics absorbing spiritual particles. We get that idea, but he's going to do something with that, he says. He's absorbing these spiritual molecules. And he's like, why are you trying to eat me? He's like, you'll just end up with an upset stomach. He says, I'm going to willfully shuffle off this mortal coil soon. And you get a close-up of his face, and it's just ragged and wrinkled and looks awful. So he's basically saying that he's going to commit suicide. He's like, I'm going to commit suicide soon. And then he says, after I do that, I'll become a powerful, vengeful spirit. And Dimple's like, this guy's lost it. So he's going to commit suicide and become an evil spirit with everything that he's absorbed. I like that Dimple says that this guy's lost it. Like, no. So obviously Dimple has not committed suicide that we know of. He was killed or something happened to him. But he's like, this guy's lost it. No. He's like, why would you do that? The fact that a ghost is like, why would you commit suicide? What are you doing? And he says, revenge. I'm going to show all the bastards who think nothing bad will happen to them. So he basically is just doing it to get revenge and to like put evil on those who he believes are living a life without it. It's like, oh my God. And he's just completely, it's like, show them what true hatred is like and what happens when they manipulate and use someone. So he's kind of like the extreme version of Mob, right? He's getting revenge for being used and manipulated. And I feel like that kind of goes back to the OP of this show and what Reigen, even though Reigen has like tried to steer Mob in certain directions, right? I feel at the end of the day, Reigen has always told Mob, he's like, and it kind of goes back to the OP where it's like, your life is your own. He's like, no, you do whatever you want, Mob. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. Just say something. It's like Reigen is always, he's a con man, and he cons Mob into joining him on these quests. But at the end of the day, he gives Mob a choice and says, if you want to run. You don't owe these people anything. If you want to do something, do it. If you don't want to do something, don't do it. So it almost seems like Reigen's trying to, without realizing it, prevent Mob from becoming someone like Mogami, who's just been used by people to use his powers over and over again. Yeah, Mogami is like the epitome of everything Mob is not. And if Mob uses his powers to the full extent, he could end up like Mogami, where he just gets to be completely corrupted and wants vengeance. And I love that we get a character like Mogami to kind of represent what that's like. And he's like, you're going to empower me to achieve this goal. And Dimple's like, what the hell? And then he's like, I absorbed too many vengeful spirits at once. Oh. And then that's when Dimple runs away and is like, oh, hell no. He's the star psychic of the 20th century. I like that we have Reigen, who's the star psychic of the 21st century. And then this is what's become of Mogami. And like the nails being like all brittle and broken. Ugh. And then, yeah, he's just like, just assaulting people. He's like, I have no reason to let you all live. And so then he just like starts possessing people. And the one guy, Jodo, like tries to do something and it just does not work out, right? And I just like, it's kind of creepy. The part where he possesses Jodo and makes him like scurry across the screen, it's actually really scary. There's a lot of imagery in this episode. I was like, oh, this is really creepy, and I don't know if I like it or not. I'm like, oh, God. And then Reigen's anti-possession jumping knee strike. Oh, my God. I absolutely love Reigen and his power. The anti-possession jumping knee strike. God, Reigen. To knock a possessed person unconscious. There's nothing special about it, right? But Reigen knows that even though the spirit is possessing the body is still the body. So if you make the body unconscious, it'll knock the spirit out. So I like that Reigen's like, no, we're going to practically solve this problem, right? God, I love Reigen. It's so great. But he manages to knock the spirit out. He's like, okay, sorry. Hey, evil spirit. If my intuition's correct, you're actually Mogami K. And then, yeah, he gets slammed up against the wall. And he's like, you know who I am. And so he's like, damn it, I was right. I love that Reigen's like, damn it, I was right. And then, yeah, he's like, why are you possessing that girl? He's like, were you into young girls when you were alive? It's like Reigen tries to get like a joke in edgewise, and then it just completely comes back. And he's like, time out. And then Mob's like, he's not stopping. And Reigen's like about to get choked to death, right? Thankfully. And then the dad, he's like, I'll stay by your side if you stop this. Oh, I like that the dad tried to help Reigen out. Like Reigen was a nice guy to help him, and the dad tried to pay him back. And just, you think it's this sweet moment, but the moment you cut to like Mogami's face with the girl, nope. And Reigen's telling him to get away. But Mogami dropped Reigen to impale the dad. And like shit gets dark. From here on in, it's like everybody's like, oh my God. And Mob's like, he impaled him. I like that Mob said he impaled him. Mob knows that it's not the girl that did it, it's Mogami's spirit. Oh my, and Reigen's just sitting there like, well, shit, someone just died. Like, that, not good, Cotton. Like, you can't be, like, Reigen's like, you can't be serious. There's, like, a dead body now. We gotta file insurance claims. It's not good. And then the psychics are like, we didn't come here to see someone die, and that they're a monster. Oh, my God. And they're all trying to leave, but they can't go. And, yeah, Mogami's spirit is just, like, knocking people out left and right. I love that Reigen's like, well, this has gone to shit. Oh my God. He's like, are you warmed up, Mob? And Mob's like, yes, well, I'm not warmed up at all, but I know I have to deal with this anyway. That's the thing, is that Mob, and it's so sad because Mob's like, I have to deal with this. Mob's like, I'm not really warmed up. I don't want to do this, but I know I got to do something. So I'm going to do the best I can. And that's all I can do. It's like, okay. I feel for Mob because he's like at 77% towards explosion, and Mob's like, I know I got to do something. Otherwise, things are going to go from bad to worse. Oh. And so, yeah, they all try to fight Mogami, and it just does not work. And Mogami's like, I don't know who it is, but someone's got decent telekinetic powers. It's true humans can't move their joints past a certain point. And Reigen's like, and the moment that they say that, Reigen's like, oh no. Like, you see Reigen physically move back, but what about a doll's joints? And the fact that the spirit's like, I'm going to hurt this girl if you keep attacking me. And Mom's like, you really need to stop. Mom's like, what are you laughing about? And it's like, it's him. Mom's like, there is a solution. And I love that he like gets up to 91%. He's like, I'll make you disappear. I love Mom getting like all serious. He's like, look, he's like, you need to leave that girl alone. Like you're not being nice. And he does drive the spirit out. And Dimple's like, now we're talking. And Matsuo is like behind the thing going, oh my gosh. And Mob realizing that this spirit, what the hell is that? Never seen anything like it. The spirit is like Mob's 100%, right? Mogami, the evil spirit that comes out of him, it reminds me a lot of Mob's 100% mode, which is terrifying, right? He's like, get out of Minori-san. But it doesn't work, right? And yeah, even when the spirit gets back into Minori, you can see it for a brief second. It looks like the 100%. And they're like, wow, he's amazing. I thought he was just some kid, but he's insanely powerful. And so then Matsuo is like, they're not just being possessed, they're fusing into one individual now. So yeah, so the idea that Mogami is fusing with the girl. That now it's not just possession. They're trying to like fuse them together, which I didn't even know was a thing. But apparently it's a thing. So I bet Dimple was trying to originally Dimple wanted to fuse with Mob, which is curious. But yeah, they're fusing into one now. And Mob's like, I messed up. I didn't make things better. I made things worse. And in the background, you see like all the spider webs and stuff where Mob gets disillusioned. And he's like, Master, the situation's gotten even worse. And Reigen's like, are you telling me he's stronger than you, Mob? He's like, yes. And Reigen's like, oh, no way. Like, Reigen believed in Mob. He believes Mob's the strongest one there. He's like, he's even livelier now than when he was alive. And then, yeah. Poor Mob. Mob just being like, what do we do? Like, his look of panic. And then all the other psychics like try to like buy him some time, but Kagani just goes past him. I love Dimple has like his little arms out where he's like, that bastard actually did it. He actually possessed someone and fused with him. That's been my goal this whole time. And so Mob's like, what do we do? He's become the most powerful evil spirit. And he looks at Mob, he's like, well, if you die and can't pass on, at least we'll have each other. I like Dimple's like, hey, at least we can be ghosts together, right, Mob? And I love that Reigen is like, excuse me, no. I love that Reigen's like, hey, don't even joke about that. Reigen doesn't want you joking about Mob dying. He cares about him that much. And Mob goes, okay, I can go inside of Minori-san and expel the evil spirit from within. He's like, that's what he's got to do. It kind of goes back to episode 1 when they were inside of the spirit because there was the evil, tomato plant spirit. And it was too much for them on the outside. So Mob's like, if I go inside the spirit, I can expel it from within. He's thinking the same thing is going to apply to Minori-san here, which is not a bad way of thinking. Not at all. And Dimple's like, are you stupid? He's like, how's a human like you going to enter another human? I mean, mine's out of the gutter. He's like, an out-of-body experience. And Dimple's like, well, I guess you could do that. He's like, but during that time, your body will be completely defenseless. He's like, not to mention her body's going to resist you. So what do we do about that? And Mob's like, well, I don't know any other way. He's like, that's the only option that we have is to do this. And he's like, Dimple, what about you possessing my body for a while and protecting it? And Dimple's like, what? And I love that Reigen's like, anything but that, Mom! Don't let this poor evil spirit defile your beautiful body. I love that Reigen's instantly against the idea of Mob, like, having Dimple possess him. I love it. He's like, if you let him in, he'll probably never leave. And Dimple's like, what? But Mob knows that there's more to him than that. Mob's like, come on. And I love that Reigen's like, are you gonna trust Dimple? Here's the thing. I feel like Dimple, by the end of this, is going to help Mob. Because as much as Dimple talks about using Mob to conquer the world, as much as Dimple talks, I feel like Dimple has grown attached to Mob, and he's not gonna let him get hurt. I feel like Dimple's gonna try to save him in the end, right? Maybe. He's like, I'm sure it'll be fine. And all the Dimple's just like, oh, you have faith in me? Okay. I love it. I love that Mob has faith in Dimple. He's entrusted Dimple to him. I love that. I love that he's like, Dimple-sama, you got this. It's gonna be all right. And Dimple's like, okay. He's like, I need to lose consciousness first. And the fact that Mob concentrates on losing consciousness, the fact that Mob can make himself lose consciousness, that he can force a loss of consciousness. And Reigen realizes, he's like, has he changed? Has Mob changed just a little bit? He's like, he's different now. He's like, what's going on? He's like, or is he trying to change himself? I feel like Reigen is becoming aware that Mob is trying to grow up. He's trying to grow up and change. And change doesn't always have to be a bad thing. Change can be a good thing. And I think Reigen's trying to figure out, like, okay, what is Mob trying to change into? And is it a good change or a bad thing? Is it something that is going to be something positive for him or otherwise, right? And then he's like, oh, wow, he actually did it. And then we see his cute little spirit. I'm like, oh my God, Mob's little spirit. It has like the little tendrils of his hair coming out. It looks like coral coming out of his hair. His little pure white spirit. It kind of looks like the 100% where it's like all the crazy hair and stuff. But his little spirit. Oh, he's like, holy shit, even I can see it. And that's when Kagami notices. And he's like, I love that Reigen's like kicks the spirit, but Reigen is not strong enough and gets like pummeled into the ground. And also, make note, Reigen did this with his hands over his head so that he could protect his head. Reigen is a smart man. He protected his head from getting slammed into the ground. Right? Good for him. And he's like, but I can't move now. And he's like, I'll just take this body off your hands. But then Dimple! I love that whenever Dimple possesses someone, he like, you see like the little attributes of that person change ever so slightly. So Mob now looks like this like kind of punk now with Dimple inside of him. It's kind of amazing. He looks a little bit like a punk. It's great. But yeah, he's like, what's this? Another spirits? What a nuisance. He's like, be gone. And then I love that even with Mob's like blank his face, she's like, now Shigeo. I love it. I love it. Oh my God. And like Mob like bursts inside of the body like the little spirit that could. So then he's like, Mob's not a normal kid. And I love that Reigen, during all of this, as he's like infiltrating his body, Dimple having faith with him, and Reigen being like, go. I know you can win. Oh, I like that Mob and Reigen and Dimple have faith in Mob. They both have faith that he's going to be able to do the thing. And I'm like, look at them. So yeah. So he goes inside of the body, and I love that what is it? Yeah, Mogami. I keep wanting to call him Kogami. He's like, your soul could have been destroyed if you made a misstep here. And he's like, and Mob's like, I didn't come here to talk to you. He's like, get out. Mob's like, I didn't come here to make friends. He's like, leave this body, please. He's like, you didn't come here to talk, did you? No. He's like, correct, but you seem so human. He's like, we're in a mental world. It mirrors the way that we see ourselves. And so I think that's interesting because Mob is naked in this world. He's naked, right? Mob sees himself as kind of like raw and bare. And maybe malleable, maybe impressionable. Like he sees himself as he doesn't really know. He doesn't have a definitive identity yet. He's kind of like just raw here. He doesn't have the knowledge of who he is as a person to develop that clear-cut identity. Whereas Mogami has like him in the suit as the psychic. That's how he identifies himself. Mob doesn't really know what to do because he's trying not to identify as a psychic. But then where does that leave him? So he's it reminds me a lot of Harry Potter, where it's like you're on the platform in the afterlife and Harry's there and he's naked and he's like, I don't know what to do with myself. And it's kind of similar to that, right? But he's like, I'm a former psychic. He's like, how about we have a little contest? I want to make note, the evil spirit that like goes around him, that's that red shade, it's very similar to the same type of energy that was around Reigen when he had the curse on his back. It's the same thing, same type. But yeah, but Mob, he's just like, you're an evil spirit and this is a mental world. And so it's kind of grisly. He like fires off shots and like just blows Megami to pieces. And there's like blood everywhere. And he says, you've been blessed with incredible power. Right? He's like, you've been truly blessed. And he's like that. And then Mob's like saying, okay, that's a ghost. That's an evil spirit. It's not a person. Right? And he's like, by the way, young man, it's like, do you know where spiritual power ESP comes from? And at first I was like, oh, we're getting some cool stuff here, like some exposition and lingo. And Mob's like, I don't have any more time. I need to exercise you and move on. I'm going to finish you now. And he says, your emotions. Your psychic power and ESP comes from your emotions. So we get this lore here that your ESP energy comes from your emotions. Which, you know what, kind of makes sense why Reigen doesn't really have any. Because Reigen is like a well put together person. Reigen's like a well-to-do adult. He doesn't really have any like major crazy emotions. He's kind of like go with the flow casual. So he doesn't have a lot of emotions with him. But he's like, it all comes from your emotions. And then that's when he like gets Mob and like punches him out. He's like, the biggest distinguishing feature of humans is how rich and varied their emotions are. Ugh. He's like, these emotions are the reason they thrive and the reason that they fight. Mm-hmm. He's like, my powers. He's like, you can't use SP anymore. I was gauging how you picture your powers earlier. And he's like, it's impressive. And poor Mob's like, got like the drool and the tears coming out of him. There's all kinds of emotions raging inside of you. But for some reason, you're playing the part of a puppet. So he tells Mob that he has all these emotions, meaning that he has all these incredible powers, but he's a puppet. And Mob has kind of been that way for a lot of this, but I feel like Reigen's trying to teach him to be his own person and make his own decisions. And Mob's been slowly, at the start of the second season, kind of coming to terms with that and trying to be his own person. Like him helping Emmy was him like trying to develop that. Him taking a stand against Reigen with saving the Ghost family was kind of doing that. Him like learning, like figuring out about the rural urban legends. Like I feel like Mob's been trying to develop his identity so he's not a puppet anymore and he's not being used by anybody. But this guy he beats him to the punch, right? And he's like, please leave. He's like, you don't get the fact that you fell into a trap. He's like, I let you in on purpose. And like, he makes him turn to stone. And he's like, now here's the question. People whose lives are filled with happiness and whose are filled with eternal suffering. He's like, who do you think harbor strong emotions more easily? Well, it's the people that suffer. Yeah. And then he says the answer is the latter. Negative feelings are much more powerful. The more stressed you are, the richer the energy they hold within. He's like, going by that, there's room for more drastic change in you. So he's trying to he basically is telling Mob, he wants Mob to be more stressed. He's like, negative emotions feed that power, right? Which explains why all the members of Claw have been having all these developed psychic powers because they all feel wronged. And Reigen doesn't have psychic powers because he's got his life together. So it's like, it kind of makes sense with that too. So he's saying that he wants Mob to get more negative. And I'm like, no, leave Mob alone. Let him be. He's like, there's room for more drastic change in you. And we see that like the crushed image of him with like turned to stone and crushed looks kind of like, it looks like the 100% of him. He's like, all you need is a change in how you see the world. So he's like, you don't see the world as being filled with, so he's like, you live a happy life. He's like, you have a happy life and that's limiting you. He's like, I want to make you suffer And that basically he wants to like put Mob in a scenario where he doesn't have any psychic powers. And I feel like he's going to try to push Mob to the limit. And then just like Ritsu, he's going to like get over emotional and his powers will awaken. And that's what he wants to do. He wants him to be filled with all this negativity, right? But I feel like he's going to try to feed off of it, like what he's been doing with the other spirits. He's like, do you want me to help you out? Oh. And I'm like, no. And he says, I've altered your memories so that you can't use ESP. A change in perspective can make a world a whole different place. And I'm going to observe how you act without your powers. Which doesn't seem like it's going to be too different. I feel like Mob doesn't act much different without his powers. And maybe that's going to be the point. Maybe I'm really worried for Mob because I don't want Mob to change for the worse. I don't want him to like become this villain or become anything bad, right? I don't want that to happen to him. But I'm like, what do we do with this? So what I'm hopeful is that maybe when Mogami looks at Mob in this version of him without psychic powers, he'll see that Mob's been kind of trying to live without psychic powers this whole time, right? And maybe he'll realize like what Mob's been going for. I don't know. Maybe Dimple or somebody can reach him. I don't know. Or Reigen. I'm so worried for Mob though. I don't want Mob to get hurt. I'm like, no. So I don't know what to do with it. It's like, So yeah, I'm not sure what we're supposed to do with all this. I want Mob to be okay, and I don't want this Mogami guy to like affect Mob negatively and make him like change for the worse. I don't want that. So I don't know. My only hope is that maybe somehow Dimple and Reigen can reach him, because I feel like both Dimple and Reigen want the best for Mob, but this Mogami guy is trying to break Mob and make him like turn into a bunch of negative energy so he can feed off of it and become stronger. And I just hope that Mob is able to overpower him and use his own identity and positivity to like overcome whatever Mogami's throwing at him. But I don't know. This episode ends like on such a dour and scary note, and now I have to wait. Awesome. Awesome. Great. So yeah. I like instantly want to watch the next episode, but I actually have to legit wait. It's too late tonight to start a new episode, but oh my God, I really want to start one. But I'll wait. I'll hold off. It's fine. So yeah, I'm super excited to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers, but I'm curious to know what your comments are. But oh my gosh, we're a third of the way through the season and so much has happened already. But this episode was so good. So good. So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I'm curious to see how Mogami and how Mob's going to get through this and what it's going to... I feel like every adventure Mob goes on, it like somehow... It even if he comes out winning, it negatively affects his mindset. And I'm like, I just want Mob to be happy. And to break through whatever this is. So, yeah. But we'll see, right? So, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 5 of season 2 of Mob Psycho 100. Bye.